But I got to tell you, it's great being on the set right now because William Lacey is with us, and he is the author of this book, Seeing with the Heart. William, thank you so much for joining us today on This Is the Day.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, the book is a short inspirational book that has spiritual reflections and uplifting verses in it. And the main message of the book is that through our faith in God, we can triumph over our trials and become transformed with new abilities, new skills, and a spiritual sight, which in turn can help us enable the transformation of others. It begins, really, the journey of that begins with when we ask God to come to us in our times of trial with full faith, knowing that He will strengthen us the way He did His Son Jesus before His crucifixion. And just as we can share in Jesus' suffering, we can also very well relate to His resurrection, in that if we allow God to, also He can raise us up from our trials and strengthen us and bring us to a new day, which we might consider to be personal resurrection or a transformation. And what I feel is that these transformations oftentimes can be very strong and very quick, such as in a person who might have endured a bad accident or illness, who has an incredible personality change and a whole new attitude towards people. Perhaps they're kinder and so forth. Other times, these transformations may take longer, be gradual over a course of months or years, such as a person who might be an athlete or a musician who suffers a career-ending injury, who then later discovers that they have a greater joy and purpose in teaching and coaching others. But then that leads to the question of why is it oftentimes when people go through hardships that they come through with a strong feeling and desire to help others. And I think that's the spiritual sight, the gift of spiritual sight that God gives us during our transformations. Spiritual sight being the ability to see as God does with the heart as well as the eyes. And it's the heart that gives feelings to what we see and compels us to want to act and with understanding, compassion towards others. And so this ability to see with the heart, I think, is probably one of the most important abilities that we can develop in ourselves and even in our children. Because when we see with the heart, we see past the physical to what is truly essential in people, which is the inner being and the spirit and the soul. And when we see past the physical, we see past physical differences, which might lead to prejudices. We also see the inner needs of our children more, which makes us better parents. And when we see with the heart, we also make better choices in marriages. For instance, when we see with the heart, when we see with the eyes, we can only like or be infatuated with what we see with the eyes, where true love comes from what the heart comes to know of the other person's inner being. So what I hoped in the message of this book would be that people would want to develop this in themselves and realize that by developing the ability to see with the heart within ourselves, within our children, we can strengthen our families and ultimately strengthen society.
I think of the words of St. Paul, we walk by faith, not by sight, as you speak. And William, you have a program too, Will Unite, which is a very inspirational program. Can you tell us a little bit about that in connection with the book?
That's really in its inception. It's Will Unite, Light of a New Generation. And as a member of the baby boomer generation, and being a teenager and growing up through the tumultuous 60s and 70s playing in a rock band, I had an opportunity to see an awful lot very quickly. What I feel is that our generation has a tremendous power of influence based on our sheer numbers, and just as our revolutions of the past heavily influenced society, I think looking back from a standpoint of greater maturity, that we might want to revisit some of our effects on society, reunite, and seek solutions to improve our society. The light of a new generation comes from President Kennedy's inaugural address when he says the torch has been passed to a new generation. Well, my question is, does that torch that was passed to this new generation still shine brightly, or has it been extinguished by the cultural revolutions of the past? I like to think that it still burns alive, and that if we fan it, we could get that torch so bright, and we could go out and we could improve society. And that way have a better legacy than what we might be leaving for ourselves, especially considering that we followed the greatest generation. So we have a lot to live up to.
Absolutely. What, William, made you decide to write a book like this, talking about really faith and about the beauty of an inner person?
Well, The way the book first came about was the first chapter in there called Lent's Little Sacrifices, Humanity's Great Gains. That came when I was struggling to determine what I wanted to do for Lent that would be different. And before Ash Wednesday was coming up and I was looking to decide, I read an article about a minister who takes care of the homeless in Boston, and I found out that one of the homeless that she took care of was a former acquaintance of mine in high school.
Oh, wow.
And which surprised me, but I looked at that and I remembered that he was with a gang that tended to get more into trouble and so forth. And at those days, we didn't think too much of why they were the way they were. But coming from a fairly well-to-do north suburban town, I thought, what is it that made the difference between some of us who don't tread too closely to the edge and those who do? Obviously, it wasn't the material advantages or the education alone, but I think it has to do with having a good adult in your life who sees with their heart and gives us the strong moral references we need to go out and survive in the world. And I was very fortunate to have a wonderful father who, despite all the hassles I probably gave him growing up in those times, he had patience and he always reasoned with me and always made me realize what the consequences of my actions were. As a matter of fact, there was a wonderful quote from Romeo and Juliet, Shakespeare, that he often used to say to me, which was, "He who jests at scars has never felt a wound." And that really sums up the ability to see with the heart. So that's...
Where can people get it, William?
Well, it's available on Amazon.com, also through the publisher, Zulon Press. And of course, I invite people to go to my website, which is seeingwiththeheart.com.
That's easy to remember.
Easy one to remember.
It is.
Well, once again, William Lacey, thank you so much for joining us. Good luck with the book, Seeing with the Heart.
Thank
Great
you.
book, and hopefully people will get a chance to read it and learn. We'll
Thank
be
you. I
right
appreciate
back
that.
with more of This Is the Day right after this. William, awesome. Great job.
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you so much.